Round 4's Fantasy Major League Rugby matchups came down to the wire, and a league member joins the show for the first time to talk about his thoughts on fantasy rugby 4 weeks into the MLR season. The Fantasy Ruckers show starts right now.
Where rugby and the world of fantasy sports collide. Welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, talking all things rugby from the MLR to leagues around the world. We're on top of it. Headphones on, pads off. This is the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Now, here are your hosts, Ryan Yee, Matt Yee, and Devin Vanderpool.
What's up, everybody? This is episode number 8 of the Fantasy Ruckers Show. Thank you to all of our league members. Thank you to our Fantasy Ruckers community members and everyone else joining in on this fantasy rugby journey. It's been a wild one so far, 4 weeks in. Of course, with me, as always, Devin, Vandy Vanderpool, and Matt Yee. Guys, this round 4 came down to the wire, especially with some of our fantasy matchups, man. It was all of them except for one matchup. And Matt, I'm sure you're excited about that one matchup.
Boys,
but every matchup except for one was decided within 3.1 points. Man, it was a fun one this weekend.
Hey, how much do you have to pay Buddy to not set his lineup?
Whoa.
We're starting off hot at the top, eh, Vandy? We're going right off the top.
I just conveniently made it very hard for him to set his lineup. That's it. That's all I did.
Well, we'll get to it, and we do have to mention that in a little bit in the league update. There was a little bit of unusualness going on in our week, but nonetheless, it was a fair victory for, to spoil it, to say the least, for a winless Matthew team heading in to round 4. But we'll cover all of that and figure out where the league stands after 4 weeks of play. But before we get into all of that and talk about this week's past matchups and the fantasy results that came with it, we do have a very special guest on our show. And it's the first time we're bringing actually one of our league members onto the podcast. We're going to welcome on John Fitzpatrick. He is the owner of Rugby Morning of our league, and he's the first league member to join our show. Fitzy, welcome to the Fantasy Ruckers Show.
Fitz,
guys,
welcome, buddy.
Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited for this. This has been great so far. These first 4 weeks have been dynamite.
Yeah, no, I think just with the discussions, we were talking about it before show, Fitzy, just the interaction that we're having within our Discord community, the traction that we're getting with on socials and on Reddit and all these different places about people who are so fired up for fantasy rugby in the MLR. It sounds like you guys are having a blast, not only watching the games, but also keeping tallies of your players and figuring out what they do, trying to work out all the points while I'm trying to crunch away the suspense every week. Seems like it surmounts for you guys.
I mean, rugby and sports is best when it's like a two-screen experience, right? If you're watching the game, you got your phone on, you're on Twitter, you're following your fantasy football team. Now taking that to rugby, taking that to MLR, I think this is fantastic, right? They're trying to grow the sport in the U.S. What is a great way to engage avid fans and casual fans, like a guy like Vandy, right, who last year wasn't watching any MLR. All of a sudden, I watched last week's episode, and he's bringing up a couple of points. And I'm like, yo, this Vandy guy seems like he knows what he's talking about.
Come on, like, don't let his head get too big here. He's only 4 weeks in, Fitz, so we got to control him because we know being in a fantasy football league with Vandy, I know what he can become and the demon we can create. We got to make sure that we tame him here. We can't let him get too past here. But
well,
no,
I'm buttering him up a little bit because I'm trying to see if he'll go for a trade offer. Maybe we'll do it live on the
there
show.
we go. Start cooking up some trades. I think that is the next big thing.
Porter off limits.
Never say never, man.
Yeah,
anything's fair in love and fantasy. So
there we go. Well, let's talk about fantasy rugby, Fitzy, because I think that's the big conversation we want to have, because the way that we've approached this project is a little bit, I guess, unconventional of what we've seen in the past when it comes to fantasy rugby, at least overseas. We mentioned it in episodes before about how it tends to be that, you know, that salary cap budget based type fantasy style, not that North American head-to-head draft style format. And I guess the whole style here was to bring that over to the MLR with this brand new league. 4 weeks in, like we said, format, scoring, structure. What are your thoughts, so far into the league?
Yeah, and I'd played those salary cap before with like Six Nations and Premiership, and it was cool, right? Because it was fantasy and it was rugby, so having some familiarity, it was cool. But I think what you guys did in terms of, hey, let's bring it back to and focus on something that North American or American fans are familiar with fantasy basketball or fantasy baseball, or most importantly, fantasy football. I think that makes perfect sense, right? Where it's head to head, it's weekly matchups, there's a draft, there's trades. You got to have buy-in if you're the only team owner that has your guy, right? And someone else nabbed him in the draft. Like, you got to have that buy-in. And it's, if you're playing a team and you're both got the same guys, like, what's the fun in that?
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
yeah,
So
for sure.
Yeah. So bringing it back to what everyone is already familiar with, right? I think that makes perfect sense. I think the scoring is interesting, right? Because as you mentioned earlier in the show, first of all, kudos, Matt, for hand scoring all of this. I mean, that is unbelievable. I hope you're accurately keeping score, because there's a couple of
I
times
think you cheated this time.
Hey, that's what I do. I'm on Team Vandy.
Hey, Fitz, I think I've done my part in making it abundantly clear here that I am a man of the people. I'm the commissioner of the people. I lay no favorites to anyone, and I will continue to do that moving forward. But
except watching me lose.
Except for that minus 50 point rule, which we'll get to with your blunder of a mistake last week. But we'll get to that.
Put it in yet. I'm waiting.
Yeah, we got to change that 1-3 to a 2-2, Matt. But it's been fun. I think I will say it has been a lot to kind of stat the games out each week, and with life happening in general, it sometimes can it gets a lot sometimes, but it wouldn't be as enjoyable. Just the excitement of seeing you guys enjoying it and seeing how much of an impact is making people digest the game differently. Even people who aren't in our league that are just, following along, they're having a lot of fun watching fantasy rugby in the MLR too. So I think that just keeps the whole thing going, which is why there's someone crazy enough like me and Matt and Vandy and even you, Fitzy, that are staying in tune with this, even though I know that it's difficult to look up those rosters, and you guys are doing a lot of this research by hand. There's no Yahoo app or ESPN app that we can go to that has all that research there for you. So I know that you guys have to put in that work there for you guys to keep your teams afloat week in and week out. So I know that's
kind of the fun in it too, right? Like your hope that everyone's kind of going to the same sources, right? But maybe you hope you see something that someone else didn't see, or you check a lineup and you get this gut feeling.
Or somebody catches a team signing somebody new that isn't on the rosters. I think Hoki's been on that. Like,
that's a black market website he's on. Like.
well, Vandy, what was it that you texted me about? What does it feel like when you're playing against some of these guys who are just so knowledgeable about the MLR?
Man, it's like playing that who's that Ian Rappaport from NFL. It's like you're playing an insider, man. The guy's making moves. I'm like, Brian, he's not even on the roster, dude. This guy's just off doing his own thing. You post 350 players, he's not any of them. How is he even relevant? And then you pop off for like 12 points. I'm like, all right.
Fitz has a good point though. It adds another element to it where it's the people who put in the work are going to see the fruits of their labor pay through on their weekly basis. Hey, you're going to put up duds like Matt last week, putting up, a couple weeks ago, putting up 9 points. You're going to have big weeks like Fitzy, who scores 57 plus points in round 3.
Up and down.
But at the same time, in that first week, you're scoring what? Was it like 8 points, 9 points, something like that? So it definitely goes.
I scored like 22.
And I think
consistency, man, consistency.
That is key. And I guess that's to my point, is that you're not going to be able to, expect to score high points every single week, but it's the team, I think, that can minimize that fluctuation the most, like what you're saying, Vanny. Stay at that 22 points. You might lose some weeks because someone goes off and puts up 57 points, but they're not going to do that every single week. So, yeah. There we go.
Matt, maybe that's something just to think about, to tweak, right? Like, I know I've always enjoyed higher scoring fantasy leagues like a PPR, right? And I'm not saying, maybe, something to think about as takeaways and learnings for next season is like, is there a PPR equivalent to rugby? And I'm not necessarily saying touches, but is there an equivalent to that?
I think there's more stock for next year into if a guy completes a game.
Yeah. And that's one of the big things too. I mentioned it last episode. Statting the minutes has surprisingly been one of the hardest things to stat, and it's interesting because it's also the thing that gives us the least amount of points, I feel like, but it's also the most consistent amount of points because you add up on your roster a bunch of these ones because the guy's sitting 80 and hey, that's 5 points right there. And that might decide your week. So even though one of them doesn't do that, a cumulative or an addition of multiple of those can do it. But I will say it has been tough to stat out those minutes. So yeah, maybe something addressing that. But I also think just the growth of the MLR when it comes to their availability of stats and what they are statting on I'm not even going to say on a live basis. Like it doesn't have to be instantaneous, but at least some sort of report that or a box score that you got at the end of the game where it shows you, you know, here are the percentage, like possession percentages. Here is your broken tackle numbers. Here are your, you know, drop ball numbers, just even little things like that, because then you can go back and kind of extrapolate that out and try to break it down to something that's fantasy digestible. But right now there's not even that, it seems like, and a lot of it is kind of either done by hand or the limited stuff that you can find on their website or just stuff you collect on, I guess, third-party resources, which I will say there are a bunch of third-party resources out there that have been very, very helpful. I mean, Hokie showed me one app in our league. He is the leader right now, Dankus Anchors. Of course, he showed me one of his resources that I apparently uses, Tribe. It's one of the apps on there that has all the scoring on there and stuff. And then you have other things like Rugby America News and things like that, where you're able to refer to these different websites. And I'll even give a shout out to Rugby Morning, what you guys are doing and being able to, you know, provide that information, just more information, more content. Goes a long way, and I think if we can keep that going, it will only make fantasy rugby in the MLR more intuitive and just different dynamic pieces, because right now it does feel like it's very try heavy based. I mean, you guys can speak to it whether or not you think that, but
to that point, like I'm always just thinking every week, like how much different this league or how much different the scoring could be and the pickups would be if tackles were in it. Like if we had a good stat for tackles and a consistent and accurate stat for tackles, we could easily be getting guys that are, you know, guys that aren't scoring tries, but you get him just because he's making a tackle every third breakdown, right?
Or how about if the guy gets absolutely smoked, like Mitch Wilson back-to-back weeks?
I will say, as much as I want to include broken tackles, I ain't that crazy. That crazy to sit through every single game. Dude, you guys will be getting results like weeks later for each round. It'd be like a 3-week delayed fantasy league where you guys will be still talking about round 2 while I'm still statting out round 1. But yeah, no, hopefully
MLR, please.
Yeah, hopefully MLR, a nice little shout out there to hopefully get us some more stats. I will say I did give a little nudge to Co and said, hey man, maybe you can tell the MLR to give us some more stats too. We'll see whether or not.
Well, man, I got 2 goals. Sure. I got 2 goals for this league. One, obviously, of course, is to win. But then the second goal, I guess 3 goals. Charity, that's great. The third goal.
Let's throw that in there.
The third goal is folks, we've been tweeting at MLR. I'm trying to see if we can get a meeting. Just, you know, hey, just a you know, a little call, a little chat about what we're doing over here.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, this is a great project.
Just get it on the radar because, hey, a little bit of fantasy rugby. Hey, look what it's doing for all the other leagues. I feel like we got something here that can bring it. And you mentioned it, Fitzy, earlier. It'll just get more people watching the games. You know what I mean? Just get new fans into it, like Vandy, people like that. It'll be a lot of fun. So before we move on here, because we do got to start breaking down round 4. Fitzy, since we have you live here, we can't go without talking to you about what happened in round 3. And I remember it like it's yesterday because you send me the message of your lineup, right? And I message you back and I say, I see that Co's not in there. Don't be surprised if Co scores a try this week. It's like, hey, it's something I'm gonna have to live with. And lo and behold, Co scores a nice little beauty there in round 3 for his first career try. He doesn't do the thing. Beautiful try. He doesn't do the thing that we discussed too, but as you saw that, what was kind of going through your mind with that? I'll let you explain yourself because we did go at you pretty hard in episode number 7.
And deservedly so. I mean, deservedly so. And I think that's what's great about this league is the fact that you guys got that connection to Andrew Co, and he loves the idea and he's having fun with it. I knew I was going to draft Andrew Co at some point. I was worried that someone else was going to try and get him before I did. And I was like, you know, when it was time to select him, I was like, perfect. Andrew Co, bang, this is going to be great. Great player, right? Like he was going to get drafted in our league no matter what. When I made the decision to take him out of the lineup because on paper I liked the matchup that Seattle had, and I put Taveti Lopetti in. But the great thing about it is it comes full circle. But as we talked about, yeah, it was a really hard decision for me to take Andrew Coe out. So I'm watching, the Rugby ATL New York game, and it was a great game. It was a high scoring game.
Oh, yeah.
Back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I saw Coe just reach up and grab that ball and just sprint down the field and like a breakaway, I'm thinking, oh my God, he's like 50 meters ahead of anyone. He's going to have so much time to do the gritty or whatever it was. And he just got mobbed by his teammates.
Yeah. And for our listeners who are listening, you can go back to the episode. We had an interview, I believe it was in episode number 2 with Andrew Coe, where he kindly agreed for whatever team drafted him, he would allow that team to choose his try celebration. Now, I will say, so we agreed on this, and we'll spoil it for the viewers because he kind of half did it this week after and we'll talk about it in our round 4 recap when he was a little bit ahead of the ball there, but Matthew has something to say on that. But it almost seemed like he was going to try, but we did agree that he was going to try to do the gritty as his celebration. Now, I feel like we talked about trying to do this minus 50 point penalty on you for not starting him last week, Fitzy, because we were just so sick with it.
Episode 2, I thought I heard Coe say minus 50.
We'll splice that voice.
That's what I heard.
Play him that week.
Yeah, we'll retroactively give you the win. That
no, they know. The listeners.
But what I was thinking, Fitz, was that I don't think we're punished enough here because, like you said, Taveti Lopetti, the guy that you placed in for him, ends up having a better fantasy week than Andrew Coe, and he ends up doing the gritty. So it's a full circle. So like he didn't even choose that, and I just feel and you get the 57 point. It's just like, what the heck, man? Like you were not punished for the way that you should have friggin' been punished for not starting.
I benched my boy Coe. The guy who I replaced him with scored 2 tries, did the gritty. I got the dub. It worked out perfectly, man. It was perfect.
My God.
And
I don't get karma like that.
Now Coe is going to get called for offside on every single try that he potentially scores for the rest of the season. And this past week was the first preview of that. So thank you for getting that jinx on there, Fitz. But I will say you did mention, you tweeted out there that he is going to be in your starting lineup from here on out. I'm sure he appreciates that. It'll be fun to see. He's having a lot of fun with the league, and in all seriousness, we've been back and forth, and it was funny. We're going to try to surprise you and bring him on the show today, but unfortunately, he's a little bit tied up with some other stuff, touring around New York and just enjoying that New York life. But hopefully, we can bring him on and get his reaction because he's looking like he's having a lot of fun in the MLR and top of all this fantasy league because he keeps on asking me questions about the points, and he's really interested. And so it's cool to see kind of players who are actually in the league. Being invested into
how many
fantasy
points
sports.
He scores every week? Is he just going, hey, how many points I get this week?
There we go. We'll see.
It'll be cool, but what I do.
Yeah, exactly. So, but yeah, hopefully he'll be able to do a little bit more than what he did on your bench there, Fitzy, last week going forward. So I think we can. There we go. There we go. So yeah, let's move on here, guys, and start breaking down round 4. But and Fitz, we're gonna keep you on here because we'd love to get your opinions on all this as we break this stuff down. But I think overall, the biggest thing here, takeaway, is that, man, fantasy rugby is rolling right now, especially with our league. I think everyone's having a lot of fun. Fitz, you sound like you're having a lot of fun. So if you guys are out there and you want to, be involved in this world of fantasy rugby in Major League Rugby, make sure you give us a follow at the Fantasy Ruckers everywhere you find socials. We're also on YouTube where you can find the full episodes, video episodes, and on podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. You'll be able to download us there as well and join us on this fantasy rugby journey because it's been an absolute blast about a month in here into the season. So with that being said, let's move on to round 4. Just some news and notes though here as we get into the league, just to start off the round 4 talk here. Some roster moves from last weekend, and you taking advantage of one of these roster moves, Fitz. Paul Lasik going to the Utah Warriors. They were on bye on this past week, but that might be a pickup that might pay off in a little bit here, coming from the Harlequins. He's looking like he's going to be a big pickup. Chris Mattina also going to the Gilgronis. Louis Sitama, these names, man, they're going to get me every time. Rugby Atlanta, and then Frederick Henry Ajuda going to Rugby Atlanta as well. But let's talk about that Paul Asik move there. I know we mentioned it last week, but you capitalized that on that move, Fitzy, with the waiver wire there. How you feeling about him for the Utah Warriors? I know Vandy is very in tune because with his new fandomship of this brand new team, it's not looking too hot so far.
I'm excited about Paul Asike when he comes back to the MLR. Now, the thing is, I spent a lot of money on him on the waiver wire. It was another $10 burner that I put on him, and he's not going to play until potentially the end of March. So I've got, I've got a roster spot sitting there with no points, right? So that means less flexibility, which I think will hamper me a little early on. But I'm hopeful that when he comes back, they plug him right into the lineup, and he's just like a sledgehammer and just crashes through the line and just destroys people. But here's the thing: Utah, of course, they haven't won a game yet, but they've been playing well. They've been getting a couple of those bonus points that they need. I think they'll turn it around, and they're gonna hang around. But yeah, Lasike, I won't be able to play him at least until the end of March. And as you guys know, I spend pretty freely on the fantasy, on the fab dollars.
Budget. Yeah, the fab budget.
I think I'm already a quarter of the way through on 2 guys for the most part.
Hey, it's okay. Ask Matt some questions about fab budget. He's running out pretty low too. He blew $16 on Christian Dye. It paid off.
Got it.
Yeah, you can trade for fab, so that is something that we are going to include. So if you're running low, if it's going to be a kicker to get $10 extra for you to use throughout the season, hey. And hey, if Fitz, if you don't get the hint there, basically Vandy is just laying little hints here that a trade that you were talking about earlier is there and available for you. So
give me
AKA he has fab budget that he is willing to give you, basically. So there that is. But yeah, lots of player moves. I mean, it's hard to keep track of all these player moves because I think out of all leagues, there's just so much movement in the MLR with players moving on and players coming in. So we try to do our best with at least the notable players. But that one was one of note because Fitz, you did capitalize on that, and him having a lot of professional rugby experience. We'll see if that pays off and translate into fantasy rugby. Quick few things here left, guys. Tim Metcher, he achieves 50 MLR caps. That's a big one. We've been mentioning these milestones, Fitzy, throughout kind of these past few episodes, and it's kind of cool to see the MLR starting to build these milestones. I know they've had a bunch of teams that have reached, certain cap milestones, that have earned certain points milestones. So the league is still young, but how you develop like a deep history with the league is with these types of things. So it's cool to see them after, 5 seasons into this thing, them starting to build, kind of a history that they can kind of, talk about. It's cool to see.
You got to start from somewhere, right? And I think those milestones are cool. And look, like when the NFL first started and these other professional leagues first started, right? Those sports weren't the biggest at the time. Those athletes weren't making the most money, right? And most of the MLR players who are playing right now, they're not making, obviously, comparative to the other athletes, they're not making top dollar. But man, they're going out there, they're busting their butts. They want to grow the league because I think everyone knows the opportunity of rugby in the U.S. I think it's ripe for exponential growth. So to say you were part of the formation of the professional rugby opportunity in the U.S., I think it's something these guys will look back on and be like, that's super cool. And oh, by the way, these guys over here were doing fantasy rugby as well. Hat tip to them, right?
I love the subtle plugs. Love it.
But on that, man, we got to keep shouting it out because 50 caps, new league, old league, 50 caps is no joke.
Yeah.
50 caps, that is over 2 seasons of cracking the 23 for every game for over those 2 seasons plus. So 50 caps is no joke and something that people deserve some.
All these guys not getting paid enough too. I don't think you can find any other sport where you got those massive dudes in the middle just smoking some of these wingers. Like,
hey, that's just how crazy rugby players are, man. They don't need the dough, dude. They just love being out on the pitch and just having a little bit of fun, man.
Okay.
There we go. But yeah,
This
Tim
is a
Metcher
prayer
hitting
for
that.
you. I'm not
Tim
religious.
Metcher hitting that big 50 MLR cap milestone. He's only the second player in MLR's history to hit that milestone. So congratulations to him. He's been able to do that with 5 seasons on the Seattle Seawolves, helping them with those back-to-back titles. I believe a few years back there when they were had that little run of dominance there at the start of the league's history. And then one last thing, guys, and I know this is a hot topic of discussion before we head into round 4, is the conversation about commentators in the MLR. And in that Giltinis and New England Free Jacks match, there were some interesting nicknames that the commentators tried to use. I'm just going to name some of them here. Apparently, Harry Barlow is the wheelbarrow. Apparently, Charlie Abel is Charlie Horse. Joe Johnson, the mechanic. You got Kyle Sakara, for some reason, is called Pot Roast. And I want to say a few games back, it was the same commentator that had this to say about
That was his
Ryberg.
last season.
The Ryberg, the quadricep with eyeballs.
Apparently Ryberg is the quadricep with eyeballs too. So what are your
You know,
thoughts about these? What are your thoughts about these nicknames? And then I guess I need to ask the questions, and I'm afraid to ask you, but what are your thoughts about the color commentary and the commentating in general in the MLR so far?
I just want to throw in quick is that he called Ryberg that last season, and this season Ryberg is now turned into Hercules or something like that. So,
More like, he's a yellow card with eyes.
oh, come on. All right, Fitzy, give us your thoughts. I'm done.
Well, one, I think some of these names are so hard to say in the league, right?
Yeah.
That, like, if there's an easier nickname to pronounce, I'm going with that nickname all day long.
True.
But a lot of these nicknames are super colorful, which I think is great, right? Like, I think
Yep.
it just shows the personality of the different players, and if fans can get behind, some of these nicknames, I think I'm all for it. You know what? Look, I think what's been great so far is that the Rugby Network has been able to broadcast all the games for free if you're in the U.S. I think in Canada as well, except for maybe the Arrows game, but I guess that's on replay and you can watch that on TSN or whatever. I don't know shit about Canadian. I'm sorry. Are we allowed to curse on this?
You're all good. You're all good, man.
I don't know much about the Canadian broadcast system. I don't know.
Garbage, just like the internet.
Yeah, you can tell that Vandy's internet's like he's got the Canadian internet up there, so he's rolling.
But,
No, it's been great. No, the Rugby Network Fitz has been fantastic, and that's that I will say, and I will admit that is a big reason why we've been able to do this whole fantasy rugby thing. Is largely part because I've been able to watch these games on demand back and be able to watch them over and over and over again. So that has been a huge help. But yeah, I mean, to your point, man. Names, dude, they're hard to say. I think they're the most colorful names in the MLR, or I should say in any sports. I mean, you got guys named. I saw one guy. His name was he was a hooker, and his last name's Rams. Brendan Rams. Like, how perfect is that? You got Rhino Herbst. He's a lock. Like, these names are just incredible.
Rhino Herbst is a great rugby name. Like,
right?
on,
That's what I'm saying. It's perfect. Yeah. So why not add some nicknames in there as well to make it a little bit more fun? But yeah, I mean, from a commentating standpoint, I mean, it's a brand new league. We don't need to go there, Matt. We'll just leave it at that.
There's been a few like Dallin Stanford. He's the guy who comes up with a lot of the catchy phrases that are funny. Like he's well known. He's all over the World Rugby Sevens circuit. Like, he's great. Like Matt McCarthy, he's just a road warrior. He's been broadcasting, commenting on games for a number of years. So I think there are a few standouts. Some have been not as good as others, but
it's the play-by-play guys are I think are fine. It's the color commentators that when they're trying to make a comment about a penalty or about certain things, I kind of listen to it and I go, oh, what are you talking
I gotta
about?
like the nicknames that are just like out to lunch. Like in football, for say, there's one guy named Chicken Salad. And it's like, why the hell would he be named Chicken Salad? Well, it's because he makes something out of nothing. Chicken Salad.
There we go. Well, I mean, like, I think the consensus here is keep the nicknames going. They're pretty fun. You have it. You get things like this.
The quadricep.
You get the quadricep with eyeballs. But then at the same point, I think what's interesting here between your conversation, Matt, between Fitzy and Vandy, is that I think there's a fine line that these commentators also have to balance as well between the experienced rugby player, rugby fan like yourself, Matt, and Fitz, versus, let's say, the brand new fan like Vandy who's still trying to learn the game. I know it's a fine line to try to please both of those parties, and I think the MLR is still trying to grasp the most effective way to do that. I mean, it's challenging, it's hard, and you're not going to get it down on the first. It's been 5 seasons, but it's still difficult. It'll be interesting.
Clarify,
you know what? Honestly, I feel like they do a good job right now explaining the penalties. The penalties are the toughest part for me off the hop. Is like the knock on was one for me that took a while to understand, but now I completely get it. I'm like, okay, that made sense for sure. Like I think on Sunday or Saturday there was a try scored off a knock, and all it was they both went up for it, hit off Buddy's hand, landed right in the lap of the one dude, and he just books it downfield.
Yeah. And I just want to clarify also that I'm new to rugby too. I'm no expert. I'm 1 and 3.
Oh, stop it! I'm not even gonna let you go there. No, as you have your Rugby Canada jersey in the background while wearing your Rugby Ontario jersey that has stop it! I'm not even gonna let you go there. Get out of here. No, you can't.
Well, Matt, one thing that I think one thing that I think we picked up on this league, and I think some MLR clubs are doing a really good job of releasing their match day 23 like a day or so in advance. Some clubs have been really late or don't release it at all, and I think that affects some of the commentators too, right? If they can't study up and know who some of the players are, and they're getting
that's a good
the
point.
roster sheet 5 minutes before the match starts, and then they're having to be able to match names to what's going on out there. I think that's been something to do. And I think it helps solve some MLR issues. I think that helps solve some getting sports betting involved. If those passes know like who players are, know what the official stats are, that's being fed properly. I think that helps alleviate some of those issues, but still some issues to be worked out.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, at the end of the day, brand new league. It's still a relatively new league, and there's still growing pains that go with that. It's only 5 seasons. I mean, it sounds like a long time, 5 seasons in, but in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't that long. So I'm sure all of these things are things that are going to be smoothed out as we move forward. And I think it's just as much as them getting the feedback from us so that they can, adapt and change as we kind of evolve as rugby fans and rugby viewers as well in North America. Because, like I said, there's still trying to find the average North American rugby viewer still, because a lot of these things are just niche guys that have been involved in rugby for a very long time that have digested a lot of other rugby overseas. So it'll be interesting to see how they tackle that going forward. But hey guys, half an hour in, I think it's finally time here to go into this round 4 matchup. Nice conversation there to start about fantasy rugby and all the news that's happening on. But let's get into some of these matchups. On bye week this week has been the Utah Warriors, the Rugby Atlanta, and the NOLA Gold. Interesting, I think, for you guys to kind of navigate through this week. I mean, 3 teams on bye. That's a big chunk of players that aren't available for you. So waiver wires were interesting going through this week. A lot of guys making some big pickups to get those replacements in, having to part ways with some pretty big names as well to make space for some guys. So it was pretty interesting to see how you guys kind of navigate through that. But let's break down this first match that was on, I believe, the Saturday at 4:00 Eastern time. Old Glory DC taking on the Toronto Arrows. It looked like DC at the start there was going to kind of pull through and kind of get it going. But as Matt said last episode, the Toronto Arrows just pulled through and didn't look back and ended up putting a bunch of points on them.
Yeah, that's what I said. Pick up your arrows, guys. I mean, these guys were putting on a, they're having a good time out there because they were just scoring tries. And I think Old Glory DC, unfortunately, is the matchup that we should all the people in the league should be looking out for when they're looking at their waiver wire and need to fill a position.
Yeah, I'll tack on and say for Old Glory, something to be concerned about is whoever has Jamison Fanana Schultz, he's probably looking at probably at least a 3-game suspension, maybe less. He got there was video of him hitting what's his name, Lucas
Rumble.
Yeah, so I'm sure the disciplinary team's going to take a look at that, and he could be facing a minimum of 3-game suspension. I'm pretty certain he's on someone's squad, so that's a big number 8 to have to fill. He's a solid player, but not a good moment for him in that game, and certainly fantasy implications because of it.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that and I don't understand how, one, the commentator didn't even touch on it, and 2, the TMO, you can hear the TMO in the TV saying, it was just a push on the back of the head as they're showing the replay of him winding up and giving a big sucker right to the eye. And then they pan in on Lucas Rumble and then just saw a huge black eye in the eye. And it's like, oh, yeah, push to the back of the head. That's what did it. But that was crazy. And he kept going, too. He did not stop. Like, he had no intentions of – he wanted to see what he could get away with that game.
Yeah, it was interesting. And it'll be interesting. I mean, we had dealt with it last week with, I'm going to butcher his name again, but Jerry Lubishagne. I heard I need to get the throat in there a little bit more. But yeah.
You tried. That wasn't bad.
Yeah, he got the 3-game suspension last week in that match, and now we have Nana Schultz, him facing possibly disciplinary action there. So it has a huge impact.
Be at least 4 or 5.
I guess we'll find out. And I mean, it's huge fantasy impact because you're not going to have that player. Like we mentioned last episode, you can't put him on your IR. What do you do? Does he just take up a roster spot for the next, 3 to 5 weeks? I don't know. I guess that's a decision. That's a decision that lads on tour, John is going to have to make because he started him this week, got the 1 point, but we'll see whether or not.
John's a true Canadian. He'd drop him for punching.
Yeah, what are you going to have a team of thugs?
Yeah. It is Captain Canada, man, and we've played against Lucas Rumble, and he's a tough guy, and he doesn't take getting punched in the face lightly. That's for sure. If I remember Rumble correctly, he ain't gonna take that lightly. So we'll see what action comes down with Nana Schultz there. But some top players from that game: Cole Keith coming through in the front row, 7 points there. Mike Shepard scoring a try, 6.2 points. Lucas Rumble, before he got punched in the face and sent out of the game in that first 20 minutes, was able to get 5.8 points. And then the lone try scored on Old Glory DC, 5.6 points. And the final question, guys, for you before we move on to this next match: is it time to start panicking on DC players? Because, man, they have not looked good for 4 matches in.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's all you got.
That's it.
I mean, 0-4 haven't really done anything on like multiple outings. Yeah, 100%.
Team-wise, the record's not good. I still think they've got a couple of individual players that could put some points up. Danny Tusitala, I mean, he hasn't quite had the start to the season that he would like. But, Tanana Roberts, he's another guy on the wing who could drop a couple. But you're right. I mean, Vanny and Ryan, I see you shaking your head there a little bit too. It's like, that's a tough decision you have to make because the bench spots aren't that deep.
No,
I guess the reason... go ahead, Matt.
Anybody has Tanana, I forget who has him or if he's been dropped.
I
but
do.
If he's playing at outside center, I would not start him. He's a bit lost there. But yeah,
you talk to Vandy because he owns him.
I'm with Fitz.
Look at your soul right now.
I think if you have Tusitala, I think he's one of the few guys that you're going to be keeping on. But everybody else, you gotta get possession and have possession to score tries. And I mean, if you don't have the ball and if you're playing defense the whole game, you're not scoring any tries, and that's not going to get us any points in this league.
Well, Mike DeBullis has been injured. He should be coming back, I think, in a couple of weeks. He's I think,
I like him
fly.
Too.
Yeah, me too. So,
I guess before we move on to this next match, the big question here is, when is it? And I think this is something that we're starting to see in not only just Old Glory DC players, but just big time players that were drafted. I think now we're 4 weeks in. When is it that you start to hit that panic button? Like you've seen guys that were drafted so high, guys like Danny Tusitala, guys like Mike Teo, first overall, just not performing. I'm not saying that he's not going to perform the rest of the season, but it's almost like fantasy football where you have a locking guy, but after a few weeks of not performing, when is it where you're like, okay, I just can't put in my lineup until I see something, or those guys just plug and plays? What is your guys' kind of mindset going forward? Because it's crazy to think, but we are 4 matches in, almost a quarter of the way through the season. Do you guys have the luxury? I mean, Matt, you're sitting at 1-3. Fitz, maybe you have a little bit more luxury with the 2-2 start, but not as much as 1-3 for both of these guys. When do you guys make that call? Because time might not be on your side when you guys are vying for those 4 fantasy playoff spots coming down the stretch.
I mean, we're only a quarter
way in. Roster, okay?
we're only a quarter way in, and I mean, if there's one thing that we know, there's like a handful of guys that are actually consistently putting up points. So, I mean, if they're in the starting lineup for me, you gotta back them if you drafted them high, and just hope that one of these games they'll come through for you. But 1 point's better than no points. So
you obviously can't think about dropping him. Those are the type of guys that rot on your bench. You know what I mean? At the end of it, if he doesn't perform like Mike Teo, I'm assuming he will. But you got to let those guys almost rot on your bench. You can't. You almost got them on a no movement clause, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's what's interesting is about a quarter way through the season, I think there's some obvious trends that are emerging, right? Like the Gilgronis are just they're whooping up on people.
Yeah.
Dallas, although improved, they haven't won yet, and DC is going to be a team you could probably put some points on. Even San Diego at 3-1, they're giving up points, but I think once we start to get into a little bit of the warmer weather, I'm hoping we'll start to see some more high scoring matchups. I think getting the jitters out a little bit, get out of that nasty, cold, wet weather, a little bit warmer. Hopefully
look
a
at
little bit
Seattle
more free
this
flowing
past
rugby.
week. That looked disgusting.
Yeah.
It makes you stronger. So they'll come back better next week.
Like that announcer said, it's all the lactic acid coming out.
Those warmer weathers, you can take that extra risky skip pass. You know what I mean? You can kind of try things a little bit more. You got a little better footing. So I think scoring will start to trend up in March and April, and I think set up for an exciting summer. But I'm the type of guy who holds on probably to players for far too long, particularly if I spend $10 on them on the free agency. So Mendia better start kicking some conversions and penalties here real soon because I need some help there.
There you go. All right, well, let's move on to this next matchup, guys. Dallas Jackals taking on Rugby New York, and Rugby New York just looking like how they were to finish off last season, beating on the Jackals 41-5. It was just not even close all match long. Rugby New York looks like a force to be reckoned with, right up there with the Gilgronis, like we mentioned. Thoughts on this match, guys?
I mean, contrary to Fitz's belief, I think it was pretty cold there. Rugby New York, I guess, felt like they were at home, so they managed to put some tries up. But I thought Dallas was going to keep it a bit tighter. I did not.
It was promising after last week. Fitz mentioned it. It was promising after last week, and then just.
I did not think their set piece was going to get absolutely destroyed the way they did.
Well, the thing is, New York was just getting tries from everywhere, like the wings, like their front row. Like it just seemed like everything was working for them. Everything they did just worked.
I mean, it was a try party for New York, and I was disappointed because Dylan Fawcett, who normally starts for them, he's a guy who's a ball hawker who's going to score a couple of tries. Yeah. He came on as a reserve. I was not pleased about that. But, what's funny about this match is I actually made a managerial mistake here. I picked up Jack Heighton fly half fullback.
He had a game, too.
I completely forgot I picked him up. So when I submitted my lineup, I totally forgot that I had him. And then I was going back through it. I was like, I thought I made another selection because I picked up I forgot who I picked up, right? But I picked him up, and then I'm going back and I'm looking at the exchanges, and I'm like, oh my God, I had Jack Heighton. He scored a try, kicked a conversion, would have gotten me, I think 3 or 6 extra points over Will Hooley. It probably would have had me winning in the matchup against Stinkers.
Who is still undefeated now.
And that's fantasy for you.
That's
fantasy right there.
I would have beat everybody else.
And of course, our boy Andrew Coe being offsides. I mean, come on, you're an international.
Of course. Well, I was just going to mention that. I was just like, I messaged Matt because I wasn't watching it live, but my brother saw it, and I was just like, damn, was it a good try? And he's like, oh no, it's getting called back. He was definitely offside. Like,
you know what? I was kicking myself because I wanted Sean Windsor to get a try assist, and I thought, oh, this is a perfect try assist. And you know what? Coe just got a little antsy. He just had to hold a little bit. And it
was a great kick. It was a great catch.
Oh, it was a perfect catch. Everything. He did like a half gritty. It was perfect, and then just got caught. He knew in his head. He was just I can't do it. It's gonna get called back. But I will say though, he did. I did message him afterwards. I'm like, oh man, good game, dude. Like, too bad you were. He's like, man, yeah, I know. Like, I too bad on that try, man. But he was in tune, and he pointed out. I told him like, oh man, Matt was pretty happy this week. He had Sam Windsor and Andy Ellis. He was able to. He's like, it looks like he'll get his first dub. And then finally he's like, oh, but who had Rugby New York set piece? Like, they went off this week. They must have got a lot of points. I'm like, yeah, but he was on the bench and got benched. So he's like, too bad. So just another lineup blunder, and he's definitely on the fantasy football crew. So he's feeling it too.
Speaking of Hayden though, I wouldn't be surprised if they continue with Hayden and Windsor playing at the same time. It's kind of hard to keep both guys off. I mean, honestly, I think Hayden's more informed than Sam Windsor is right now. And it's hard for me to say that as a Sam Windsor owner, continuously watching Hayden steal kick points away from him. I punch myself every time it happens, but
I wonder if that was matchup based, right? Because I think they pulled a couple of their regular starters for Dallas.
Yeah.
I was impressed with Buckley. I thought Buckley, the scrum half, played pretty well.
him too.
I'm also wondering like how many of these. I mean, obviously like Andy Ellis and Sam Windsor are both like long-term vets and they've been playing rugby for a long time. So how much of it is just like, all right, these are the later days of my career. We'll let Buckley start. We'll let these younger guys start, and then I'll come in and close out the game. I know Windsor start, but not playing the full match. Who knows?
That's a good point though, because would you rather have Andy Ellis playing 60 minutes in March, or would you rather him playing 65, 70 minutes come, May, June, July when you're in the stretch run for a playoff spot?
True.
Mind you, sometimes it looks like Andy Ellis is out there for a Sunday jog to each break.
It does look like that, but at the same time, I think that goes to show you like how good he is, compared to all the other players. Because when he was on, and I was watching some of those later in the match tries, he was like, and he was a large part of that distribution and opening those gaps for those players. So yeah, he might be going for a Sunday jog, but for the MLR, it's a Sunday sprint for everyone else. So
he's like the old man in the rec basketball league. You're like, I'm definitely guarding this guy because he's getting no points.
Right,
and then he takes you to the hoop.
It's Adam Sandler in the rec basketball league, basically.
There we go. Well, let's move on. A few matches here to round out round 4. Seattle Seawolves taking on the Austin Gilgronis in a very, very wet matchup. 25-18, Gilgronis coming on top, still staying undefeated. Some guys that were the top performers here, guys, before I let you guys talk about it, as I pull it up. We got Lockie McCaffrey, Rhino Herbst coming through. Lockie McCaffrey coming in with 7.1 points. Rhino Herbst coming in with 6.7. And then some familiar names here. You got Julian Dominguez. He's been on fire for this entire season so far. Crazy. 6.6 fantasy points. Mac Mason, he's been, a big time player for the Gilgronis and a big part of their success and a big part of Hokies' success, except for him not being in his lineup this week, even him getting the dub. 6 points there for Mac Mason. I don't think we need to talk too much about the logistics of this match, but just I think touching on the Gilgronis, and is this team the real deal, man? Because I feel like there was some doubt with them a couple matches in. I mean, they were taking some lighter competition. They took on Old Glory DC. They took on Dallas Jackals to start the season. But I mean, they're coming off of a big win against Seattle. Man, I think this is the team to beat in the MLR right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to say. I mean, this league is honestly so competitive right now. I feel like that people who are expecting to win are not winning. People who we thought at the beginning of the season was going to be just awful teams, or going 3-1 like the Houston SaberCats. But I think they could be the real deal. I mean, I guess we'll see. We're 4 games in, so
I mean, that's the thing too, guys, is that there's a lot of, I mean, just like our fantasy league, I feel like there's a lot of, with how much movement and how dynamically and competitive it is, there is a lot of volatility when it comes to week performances. And I think I'm kind of getting, I guess, flashbacks to 2 weeks in, and after seeing the SaberCats play, we were really high on them. Like, oh my God, like look at this team that was able to beat the Guiltinis and then come out and have a very competitive match against Rugby New York. Maybe this is a team that went from 8th to being very competitive this year, or excuse me, came from finishing 12th last season to, being competitive this year. And we're like, oh man, these are the SaberCats. This might be the next team. And then now they've kind of fizzled out and now are even. Maybe this will happen to the Gilgronis too, but I just don't know. It's tough. They looked so cohesive over every other team at this point of the season. It's just hard to argue against that.
Just remember, teams that start 1-3, maybe 0-3, they can go on to win the chip. You never know.
Is that a little bit of a foreshadowing to what you're going to do in our fantasy league? Is that what you're trying to say here?
You never know. The bank's retired, so it's time to go.
One thing that I'm tracking from a player standpoint is, because it affects my team, is Mark O'Keefe, who's a center for the Gilgronis, who has been playing great this year. 2 weeks ago, he had 2 tries, but he came off on halftime, or they subbed him out and brought in Dom Aquina, who. He's a guy who had that electric try, I think, a couple of weeks ago, but he's a guy that concerns me a little bit because are they going to start splitting minutes a little bit more? He's an electric runner when he's got the ball in his hands. Is he on your team?
It's funny. Yeah, he's on Vandy's team. And it's funny you mention that because we had a conversation about this last week where we were like, we had the conversation about players who may not be starters, but maybe kind of these guys that come in later in the match and have a real big impact. And it seems like that's kind of the role that Akina is having right now for the Gilgronis. I mean, what he was able to do last match, not round 4 and round 3, when he turned on the Jets at oh my gosh, like not many guys not many guys can do that. And if you can bring a guy like that late on into a match to have that type of impact, maybe that's the role that he carves out. It's going to be hard to rely on a guy like that. But maybe there are certain players that you're going to be able to plug in your lineup who are maybe not starters who have that role. But it's hard. I would be scared too, Fitzy, when I see a guy like Akina who's athletic as he is, vying at that center spot.
O'Keefe's a good player. I mean, the guy's a good player, but him coming, as an outside center, inside center coming off at halftime, unless he's injured, like you should be on the field for 80 minutes.
It's tough though, Fitzy. I mean, there is no, the thing with this that I've noticed is there is no consistency to tell, is he going to play in 80? Maybe there's some guys that, are locked in for 80, but at the same time, the coaches can make any decision to just say, all right, we're gonna make a sub and make that out. And then you're sitting there like, I'm relying on this guy for whatever points. And so far he's not even going to get one. So it's tough. And it's hard to drop those guys too, because they can go off at any point because you've seen it before.
Yeah. Taveti Lopetti for Seattle. I mean, every time he gets the ball in open field, I'm like, he's going to break. He's going to shake someone's ankles. He's going to burst through the line.
Yeah.
He had a tough game again.
It's fun to watch to have those guys
he's
too.
Still concussed, so that's probably it.
We'll see. All right, so let's wrap up these two matchups real quick here, guys. Houston SaberCats, San Diego Legion. The Legion coming up on top, 31-20. Some top performers from that match. Thomas Maroney. Might preview him here in the waiver wire segment. 14.5 fantasy points, sitting 23 on the season so far. Back row center eligibility, so that's pretty tasty as well. He came huge for the San Diego Legion this past week. And Vandy's boy feels like he gives him a heart attack every single week. But Joe Pietersen coming big too, 9 points this week. Wasn't enough to get the dub, but he was able to go. And some other names: Jax Hidalgo, 7.7 points. David Kotzer, 7 points for Houston. And then Christian Dyer, 6.6 points for Houston. Big pickup for Matty there. But quickly, guys, biggest takeaways from Houston, San Diego.
I mean, it's I'm sad to see.
I apologize for what I said before the season started. I low-key, not even low-key anymore. I like the Legion.
Get out of here. Get out of here. The Warriors don't want to hear that. Man.
Yeah, the Warriors
can't hear that.
You got a mistress now. You got a mistress now. The Utah Warriors are going through a tough time. They're going. You can't be going on having a side chick here, Vandy. You got to be all in with Utah Warriors.
Your eyes don't wander, okay?
Oh my gosh. Okay, come on now. I know you're better than that, Vandy. Come on. But Fitzy, any thoughts here on fantasy implications for San Diego Houston match? Anything you saw particularly? I mean, it looks to me a lot of free agent available guys in this match that are available for pickup this coming round.
San Diego's fun to watch. I think they're just fun to watch. They're going to put up a lot of points. They're going to work things out on defense. It seems like teams are able to move the ball a little bit on them, but I just love watching Nate Osberger play. I mean, that dude has been playing lights out. And Peterson, I mean, that guy practically is automatic from the tee, so those kicking points are clutch. So, maybe that's a trade opportunity for everyone who has him.
Yeah, there we go. All right, and then let's hit this last matchup, guys. Giltinis versus the New England Free Jacks. It was a tight one, and then the Giltinis finally, it was a good match, and finally Giltinis able to pull through there with the big dub. As I pull up some names here, I know Vandy, you had a bunch of these guys that pulled through for you. A little bit short there, but nonetheless, it was good to see those guys pull through. Not so much John Ryberg for
I don't even want to talk about him. Let's just move on.
All right, well, here's some names here.
He's the dud with thighs. That's what he is.
Yeah, there we go. Well, here's some names that were topping the list there in that match. Two New England players, Paula Balacana and Peter Jansen, 6.3 points, 6.1 points respectively. Big pickup for JJ with Peter Jansen. He was able to put the fab dollars on that and outbid Hokie by $1 there. And then the pickup by Hokie there, basically who won him the matchup Paula Bellicana against Rugby Morning, against you, Fitz. How did that feel seeing that he made that matchup pick?
Great pickup. Go back and watch the highlights of how he scored that match, how he scored that try in the match. So he scored in like the 44th minute, right before. But if you watch the play, I forget who offloaded the ball to him, but he basically just threw it out on the wing. The ball bounces. Normally, right, a rugby ball, it's such an odd-shaped ball. The ball's going to bounce backwards. It's going to go forward. It's going to go out of bounds. It bounces right into his freaking hands and just fall over.
Rolls over end to end, perfect. Like
I lost my fantasy matchup because of that.
And I will say
that was the karma coming back.
Starting
you didn't get the minus 50 points, so
for Fitz, for what it's worth, I did not score. I believe it was the 8-man on what's it called, on New England. Who's the 8-man on that team? I can't remember. It's passing by me, but it was the 8-man, and I did not who made that blunder of a pass, and I did not count that as a try assist.
Thank you.
So if that goes for anything, that was not a good enough pass to pass as a try assist, but I can't take away the try of Paula Bellicana, so unfortunately can't do anything for you there.
That's
but
the way the ball bounces. I mean, great pickup by Hokie there, right, to get Vegas Anchors to pick him up.
And that's the type of stuff that's going to keep you undefeated. He stays 4-0, so pretty big, another big week with him. But
even though Giltini's won, one of the things that I took away was that Giltinis are by no means are one that I would say comfortably. I mean, the score obviously says it, but they were making so many errors in the 22, and it seemed like they have this trend of shooting themselves in the foot when they have a chance to win games, and obviously they won this one, but when they have a chance to score more tries.
Watching them, they just dominate, man. Like they dominate.
That is true.
They dominate the end, and they just never get points off it.
Yeah, and I mean, most of their tries were. I mean, the tries were mostly, I believe, from not within the 22. It wasn't building phase within the 22. It was making magic happen through the backs, right? And I think once they get in the 22 and they just, I don't know what it is, but to your point, they don't score when they're in there.
I mean, I will.
They literally said like the wingers and everything weren't even touching the ball for what felt like 15 minutes. It was just like meet the wall, pass the ball, meet the wall, pass the ball. And they didn't try and do anything to the outside, nothing. Like it was just like repeat. And then thankfully Nathan DeHolt got one in there, like right on. But I mean,
I will say, I will say, guys, though, that with this Giltini's team, something to look out for, which I have noticed, is that this is not. I don't think this is the same Giltini squad that we're going to see in 2 months' time or in a month's time. There's a lot of things that they're dealing with right now. I feel like there's a lot of players that are playing in certain spots that aren't going to be in those spots, I think, come a month down the line. So it'll be interesting to see how the Giltinis kind of navigate through this as they start to get some players back. I mean, there are some big names that we haven't even seen a glimpse of yet. I know we saw a little bit of Matt Guiteau earlier off in the season. Hasn't played since, I believe, that first round.
And the most
we haven't seen we haven't even seen DTH yet.
That's all you saw of him.
That's all you saw. And I mean, he was the try scorer leader last year. So you have players like that haven't made an appearance yet for the Giltinis. So it'll be interesting to see how that kind of navigates as we move forward. But
I mean, my only last thing to say with this, and it's got no fantasy implication at all, but the audacity of Mr. Andrew Gilchrist to sponsor his own games with not the martini drink of the Gogroni, not the martini drink of the Giltini, no, the lager of the Gilly. The audacity of this guy to continue to throw his name in the mix. Oh my goodness. Anyway,
you know what? I think we need to have an episode where we taste test all of them. Let's go get a Giltini. Let's go get a Gilgroni, and let's go get this lager Gilly, and let's see how good this really is, and let's see if it's worth it to be calling a friggin' rugby team based on these drinks. I don't know. I feel like it has to be a pretty dang good drink for you to be naming a rugby team on it. That
the beer sponsor of every MLR team will just have a taste off.
There we go. Well, let's move on here, guys. Yeah, there we go. For sure. Free drinks. Dude, Fitz will be there first thing.
We can start at 8 a.m. We can start filming at 8 a.m. Let's go.
There we go. It'll be an extended live stream. By the end of the day, we'll be absolutely shot. We'll be all passed out. It'll be great. But with that being said, Fitz, we're going to keep you on for one last segment here to give you an update on how the league is going with a little announcement by Commissioner Yee. That's right. Hear ye, hear ye. It is Commissioner Yee with his 3 thoughts of this week. Got to give you guys a little bit of an update, though, before I give you my thoughts on this first round. How are the teams standing after 4 rounds of play? Well, let's talk about the matchups that came through this week. Victoria's Secret beating Lads on Tour 17.5 points to 14.6, came down to the wire. Peter Jansen of Lads on Tour, John's 6.1 points was just not enough to take over Hanko Gurmicius and the Victoria's Secrets, 17.5 points there. Ruck and roll, Matt coming out with his first big dub, beating the Tijuana Hookers 22.5 to a whopping 2 points. And I will touch on that matchup in a little bit of extraneous things happening there, which made it not as close as it should be, but we will touch on that.
Fair win. It was a fair win.
There we go. Dankus Anchors beating, unfortunately, Rugby Morning 18.3 to 15.2. Not as high of a scoring matchup as last week, but nonetheless, it was still down to the wire. Mike Shepard 6.2 points, just not enough to overtake what Dankus Anchors was going to do. Dankus Anchors stays undefeated. Rucking Goat falling to Bing Bong Theory 26.6 points to 24.1. So a close matchup, Vandy. Like you said, you would have beat every other team this week except for West, but I do think that is trending upwards for you. A little bit of a standing update here. Dankus Anchors stands atop of the standing still at 4-0. He has a whopping 126 points for. That is the highest above anyone else by 16 points. Bing Bong Theory, number 2, moving up 2 spots from number 4 last week. He's sitting at 3-1 at the 2nd spot. And Fitzy, you falling a little bit here. You're going from 2 to 3, sitting at 2-2 now. Lads on Tour is at 5th. Victoria's Secret, number 4, both sitting at 2-2. Points 4 is the difference there. And then we got 3 teams sitting at 1-3 in the order of Rucking Goat, Tijuana Hookers, and then Ruck and Roll to wind up the bottom there. Unfortunately, Matt, you still got to sit at the bottom there. You just haven't put up enough points. You have passed the 60 bird, finally. Last team to do so, but not enough. You need around 10 more.
About my poor record, I'm gonna have to bring the bag back out, and this isn't gonna be a good show.
You retired it, man. We get better and better week in and week out, man. We keep on moving up here. We retired that bag. Next week we're gonna hear good things. Be positive, man. Be positive. It's all good. So that is the updated standings and the points for. Just some thoughts though that I need to touch on here. I think the biggest thing here, and I did have a conversation with our league members, is I think the idea of making sure that we're setting our lineups week in and week out. I think with this league, especially with how reliant I am on our league members and our guys to kind of participate and stay in with this, it is important that you guys continue to send me your lineups on time. Make sure that you're getting me your waiver wire claims and your pickups on time as well. It's a big piece of how we're going to keep this thing going. And I think if there's any faulties there, it's very easy for this thing to fall apart easily just with how the things we're doing and the way we're doing it. It just requires the participation of all our league members to its fullest. And I get it. I get that there's real life and I get there's things that happen outside of it. So if there is anything that does come up that inhibits you of, let's say, setting a lineup one week, just let me know and we can figure something out and try to get your lineup up. Whether or not it's, figuring out something in advance, we can try to work with you. But I think the biggest thing here is having unset lineups going into the round. I think that's the biggest thing that we can't have. And I know that this is going to not happen with our league, but if league members start becoming inactive and not starting setting lineups, we have a lot of people that are really excited about fantasy rugby that would love to have a spot in this league. And we don't want to waste those spots by guys that are inactive, because even in any fantasy sport, and we've all dealt with it before, when you have inactive league members, it just kind of brings down the whole thing. So we want to make sure that we keep this going forward and keep everyone as active as possible. I'm not worried with you guys, but just what needed to make sure I made that clear out there.
And feel free to not set your lineup when you're playing me. I'll say it every week, but just
I mean, I will say, Matt,
just forget. Have a few too many
beers.
I
beat you week 1 without even changing my lineup. I don't even know who they were.
There we go.
What?
I will say.
Super Bowl,
even with that lineup set, Matt, you were going to come away with a W, so not much change there. So you give yourself some credit. You put it together a nice little lineup there to put you 1-3. I wouldn't cut you too loose, but yes, you get. I think that's a round of applause. You got the first dub of the season, man. Good job. Everyone else is ready.
Charity would have made good money.
Here. That's true. It is true.
For W
and just one last announcement here for our league members. I will be adding a free agent tab into our league spreadsheet. I think that was a consensus kind of thing from our league members, so I'll be adding that. I'm just going to paste all of the players who are on that main spreadsheet who have a free agent designation on that spreadsheet. I'm just going to take those players, paste in a different spreadsheet, so at least guys can control F and just look at that spreadsheet of all the guys who are available, and I'll remove them accordingly as they get picked up. So that will be added as well. Fitz, since we have you here, and we'll round out the show with at least this segment with this and having you on with this, are there any improvements or any suggestions or feedback that you have that you've been noticing 4 weeks in? Because we would love to hear it, because I mean that's the whole point of this project, right, is to all of us to kind of work together to make fantasy rugby as optimal and as the most fun it can be. And I think by just getting the feedback from the league members is a great way to do that. So with you having played this for 4 weeks now, anything that you have in terms of suggestions or things that you would change moving forward that maybe we could take into consideration?
Yeah, and I don't know if there'd necessarily be changes to implement for this season, but I think finding additional ways for players to accumulate points, right? Because I think it's fun when you go in and you see your fantasy score and the numbers are kind of high, right? Like when you've got zeros next to some players, you're like, wow, those guys do absolutely nothing all game. It certainly didn't look like it, right? So like, yeah, is it tackles? Is it, a half points for some type of possession? Are there points for, if you do a grubber or some kicks that are successful? Do you lose a point if you drop a kick? Things like that, right? Or like ways for players to accumulate points a little bit more, so there's not zeros next to some of the players. That could be something to be figured out. Another thing that you hit on, and it's tough, right? Because you're hand scoring this, but and obviously there's not a central place to go where we could follow in real time. But that's kind of also the intrigue, I think, of this league, is that we get the points unless you kind of scoring at home, and who's scoring tries, if your team is doing well or not. But finding ways to particularly if there's a game on a Friday and a couple on a Saturday and some on Sunday, have a general idea of where your team stands going into some final matchup, say like a Saturday night or like a Sunday. So like kind of adds to the suspense a little bit, particularly since the matchups were so close this past week, if it was like, hey, going into the LA New England match,
you're down by 5.
You need a try from this guy, so. But again, that is so hard. We've got lives outside of this, or not. I don't know.
No, I'm just in my cave here, just crunching away numbers. When I'm off here, crunching away numbers. That's how I need the people to see me. Just some curmudgeon-y friggin', just in the dark cave of the Fantasy Ruckers studio, trying to figure all this fantasy rugby stuff out. But
I will say it's encouraging to see so many. Folks in the general Discord channel that aren't players in the league, because to your point, I think there are people fascinated by what we're doing and interested by what we're doing, and there's definitely some characters in this league, and I think that expresses itself in some of the antics that take place in Discord. So like the more of that, the better. But across the board, I've just been enjoying it.
For sure. And I give a shout out. A lot of people have been like that, where they've been enjoying the league. It's really rewarding to see that too from our end, just because it's cool to see a lot of people buying in, even if they don't have, I guess, quote unquote skin in the game like you guys have being in this league. But man, I'm getting good feedback. There's one guy on our weekly Reddit post where we post the rankings and post the standings to give everyone updated with their league, and shout out to the MLR community on Reddit. They've been absolutely fantastic with the support with this project. There's been a lot of people that have been wanting that weekly update, and I only do it because there are people interested. So shout out to you guys out there. But someone posted, they're like, besides the MLR itself, this is my next favorite thing to keep track of. And I think they're, like you're saying, Fitzy, there's that intrigue of fantasy rugby and putting, I guess, a different spin on how to watch these games, which makes it a lot of fun. So yeah, no, that's great points. And I think that's something, all those points are something we want to see in future fantasy MLR seasons to come. And as we let you go here, Fitzy, to round out this show, man, I know you got a big thing going over at Rugby Morning. I have subscribed to your daily morning newsletter that comes out, lets me know what the heck is going on in the rugby world here in North America, but also across the globe as well. It's a nice little spot to kind of get all that information. Why don't you kind of explain to the people what that's all about and what you're doing at Rugby Morning?
Yeah, it's pretty much it's a newsletter that goes out Monday morning through Saturday morning, and it's a way just to curate some of the top news around the world, primarily with an American / North American point of view. And it's an easy way for folks to stay informed on some of like the headlines and that are going on in rugby and MLR and Eagles overseas and things like that. And it's an email that you can read in 5 minutes after your morning coffee. So yeah, you can find us on social at Rugby Morning. You can sign up from there. So appreciate it.
Yeah,
appreciate the plug.
Definitely make sure you go check that out, because even
Vandy wasn't interested. He just got up and left.
Yeah, no, Vandy, he's screw. I already subscribed. I'm already onto my research and everything
right now.
Yeah, he's ready to subscribe. But no, it was a great a resource to kind of get all that content for me, at least. Haven't been subscribed for, I guess, a month and a half now, just to see, hey, what's going on today, and it's cool. And I appreciate you giving the Fantasy Ruckers shout out there in that email as well, because I'm sure people will be wanting to see a fantasy rugby aspect to that as well. So no, it's been a lot of fun to see that in there and all the other content, and like I said, Fitz, it's been great to have you on here to kind of give the league member kind of point of view, and I guess Vandy's too busy subscribing to that email already, but we'd love to have you on again, man, and I really appreciate all the support and all the fun and all the other stuff that you've been contributing to this league, man. It's been good.
Well, guys, appreciate you having me on, and again, thanks for starting the league. It's been a lot of fun, and good luck, fellas, this weekend. I hope you pull off your second win.
Yeah, that's
all.
all.
Fitz doesn't actually mean that.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
you guys,
I know there's
don't worry. I will be posting the matchups for the rest of the season on the spreadsheet, so you guys will see who you guys are facing. But I haven't posted yet, so don't be wishing anyone good luck too soon. Fitzy, there, you might be facing one of these guys. But hey, man, good to have you, man, and hopefully we can have you on soon, man. We'll definitely bring you on again.
Absolutely, good stuff. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Buddy.
All right. Well, that was our conversation with Fitzy. Good conversation, man. I think it's really good to see, I guess, the point of view from someone who's in the league. It doesn't have a stake in the project, but has just joined it for fun. Yeah. It's been really cool to see what he had to say about the league and the input he had to say about it.
It's even great to just see the personalities of the people that are participating in this, and
humanizes it.
Yeah, and the depth of knowledge that different people have on the game, and the different opinions and point of views of the game. I think it's awesome, and seeing the way that people are getting their actual opinion on the league. It's really nice to hear.
Yeah, it is. It is pretty cool. So we'll definitely try to bring Rugby Morning and Fitz back on to definitely have that conversation again and talk about those hopefully big weeks to come in the future. But with that being said, longer little thing here, guys. So we're gonna not touch on this too long. We're gonna quickly go through waiver wires and our round 5 match preview. Just some quick guys that you're seeing. So let's talk about some waiver wires quickly here, guys. The guys who are available this week. We mentioned it. A lot of those guys came from that match between was it the Jackals? No. What was the match that had a lot of free agents available? Was it Houston?
Well, there's a lot of San Diego guys. There's some Rugby New York guys.
Oh, San Diego. There we go. That San Diego match had a bunch of players from there.
Yeah,
but,
I mean,
So here, let me list the top names, guys, here of guys that are here, and then we'll see what your reaction is here. So Thomas Marani, he rounds out the list right now. He's the top player, 23rd on the season, 16.5 total fantasy points. Now 14 of those are coming from this last round, but he does have the center back row eligibility, which could come huge. A new player for Rugby New York coming in, Kalola Tulomo, didn't make any appearances in the first 3 weeks, but comes in big in round 4, front row position, 11.4 fantasy points. I mean, Fitz, mentioned it. Usually it's Dylan Fawcett that is reaping the rewards of those set piece plays, but this time it was Kalola Tuiloma.
I mean, let's just remember that was a one-off for New York to be that dominant in the set piece. I don't think they'll be that dominant again.
Fair enough. And then we got Jax Hidalgo. He's sitting at number 15 on the season. So I think he's the highest free agent so far. 20.1 fantasy points, scoring 12.4 in week 3 and now 7.7 in week 4 for Houston. He's a back 3 player. Not sure how many guys need back 3 players, but those are your big double-digit scores. Let's see here who else there is. Duncan Matthews, Nick Feeks, Harry Barlow are some big names that are still available. Any guys that you're eyeing in particular here for the waiver wire?
I mean, I think I talked to you about this, Ryan, earlier in the week or after the Toronto match, but I think somebody that might warn a look. He didn't get too many points, but maybe not for this week since Toronto's on bye, but Matthew Hood is somebody who seems to be getting the ball a lot and seems to be breaking the line a lot. I think that at some point that's going to show up on the scoreboard. And the other person you brought him up is Marani. They're playing the Old Glory DC, and as I say, pick up your San Diego Legion players. They're facing Old Glory DC. It's time to pick them up.
Yeah, Vanny's got a bunch of those, so maybe we won't see many waiver wire pickups from him, but we'll see whether or not he trusts his Legion players. I know he trusts Peterson. I think he's earned his trust after the past 2 weeks. And Bjorn, there we go.
And just in addition to that, I just forgot a San Diego Legion guy, Matthias Freya.
Yeah,
that guy looks good.
He's picked up though.
Oh, I don't think so.
No, he's not, Vandy.
No?
He's a free agent,
so.
yeah. And guess what? He can kick as well. So
I mean, he literally kicked a ball straight off of another kick back into the 22. He received the kick. He didn't decide to catch it. No. He kicked it out of the air, volleyed it right back.
Really?
Is that the qualifications for
That's
an
the
automatic pickup?
qualification to say that you got to pick him up.
There we go. Vandy, shut up.
And put at least 90 fab on him.
There we go. Well, that's some waiver wire pickups that we have mentioned. Don't want to get too deep in the weeds here because we got to wrap up this show pretty quickly here. Yep. But we will be releasing our weekly PDF document on our Discord channel that has all the weekly rankings, the top performers from round 4, the top performers on the season so far, top free agent picks, and like I mentioned to our league members, in our league spreadsheet, we will have top free agents available for you ahead of the waiver wire transaction period, which you will be able to have a look at to break down what players are available and what positions they play, if they kick, how many points they have, all those nice things for you to make those waiver decisions. And then let's move on here quickly. I'm just going to name out all the round 5 matches here, guys. There are some exciting ones. Just tell me which one you're most excited to watch this week. I will mention the Toronto Arrows are on bye, so make sure you get all your Toronto Arrows out of your lineup and you replace them with players who are playing this week. It's not a mega bye week like last week, so it's going to be a little bit more easier to manage, but be wary. Toronto Arrows players will not be dressing up in round 5. So some big matchups here. Seattle Seawolves taking on the NOLA Gold, 3-1 for the Seawolves, 0-3 for the NOLA Gold. The matchup of winless teams, the Utah Warriors taking on the Dallas Jackals. Warriors 0-3, Jackals 0-4. The 2-1 Rugby Atlanta team is taking on the Houston Sabercats, who are 2-2. And this is a fun one here. The Gilgronis 4-0 taking on the Giltinis at 2-1. Rugby New York taking on the Free Jacks. The Rugby New York are still undefeated at 3-0 as well. Free Jacks 2-1. And then the Legion are taking on the 0-4 Old Glory DC team. They are sitting at 3-1. Guys, if you looked at those matchups there, which one are you most excited to watch this round 5?
Utah get their first dub, baby.
There we go.
Somebody's got to get. I was going to say that matchup right there. Somebody's got to get their first dub out of those two teams. So who's it going to be?
I guess next episode we'll be either talking of hey, first franchise win for Dallas. This is great. And Vandy's going to be crying. Or we get really pumped up for Vandy because his team, he gets to experience his first team's MLR win as a fan.
Job, baby. I can feel it already.
Hopefully.
And,
In my bones.
The only other, I think the other matchup that's notable to look at is let's find out if these Gilgronis are the real deal and they face the former champs. Giltinis aren't playing the best and they're not in the form of last year, but I think this will be still a good test for them to see where they're at and whether they're the real deal. And maybe
who's at home for that one? Gilgronis?
The Gilgronis are home, so we'll see. And they've had a pretty big showing there with their fans. They've had. I mean,
anything's better than
actual
seeing the empty.
too.
Yeah, anything's better than seeing the empty LA Coliseum.
Yeah, so it is interesting. So with that being said, and Vandy wanting to see that big dub by the Utah Warriors so bad, I've allowed him to give him a little bit of extra mic time to give a little send-off message here to his Utah Warriors as they prepare for that Dallas Jackals matchup. Vandy, I leave it all to you.
All right, boys. I mean, it's simple here. We got to activate Mike Teo. I mean, at the fullback position, he's got to make himself open. He's got to get in those areas. You never want to put it on one guy. There's 15 guys on the field, but some guys need to step up. All right, at the end of the day, if we can't beat these Jackals, we ain't got to hope this season. So, I mean, the script's there. We got the big bye. We got the big rest. And, I mean, it's all downhill from here, baby. We win the next 3. We're 3-3. Easy money.
That just sounds like
I'm convinced you've cursed them. You've cursed them.
I think so too.
I mean, you guys have been throwing around cash in the Discord channel of going to charity with all this 0-16 talk with Matt and all this stuff.
God,
Man, I don't know. I feel like there needs to be a discussion. If the Utah Warriors go 0-18 this regular season, and then we'll replay the clips that Vandy played at the start of the year with how confident he was. I think we got to do something there. I think there's something. So league members,
I think it should just be if they finish last.
Well, hey, I'm open to discussion. Well, we'll figure that out. But with that being said, we'll leave it off on that note, and we'll find out whether or not the Utah Warriors get that first dub this week, and we'll find out whether or not Matthew can get a second dub, whether or not Vandy can get a second dub, whether or not they can keep it rolling. We'll figure it all out. Exciting fantasy matchups to come. Make sure you all stay tuned. The rankings will be coming out shortly, and all the other updates will be on our socials at the Fantasy Ruckers. Make sure you follow us there. Make sure you give us a like on YouTube and subscribe. We really do appreciate it. And please, everyone, give us some feedback here. Join our Discord channels. Join the chat in our communities. Give us some feedback, what you think should be in fantasy rugby. And we love to hear it. And we love to take it on to just make fantasy rugby closer to becoming a reality in the MLR. With that being said, for Matt Yee, for Devin Vandy Vanderpool, I appreciate you guys all tuning in. We'll be back for episode number 9 coming up next week.
You've been listening to the Fantasy Ruckers Show, bringing fantasy rugby to the masses, covering everything rugby from the MLR and beyond. We hope you enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review, and be sure to tell all your friends. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, connect with us on social media at the Fantasy Ruckers. Till next time, this is the Fantasy Ruckers Show, signing off.